Over in the Senate, the Medical Affairs Committee spent the day discussing the proposed fetal heartbeat bill. Committee members heard testimony on the measure that would prevent abortions from being performed after 6 weeks following conception. During today's discussion, Senator Tom Davis outlined the penalty that doctors could face if they perform an abortion after a heartbeat is detected.
In regard to this particular bill, the sentence would be imprisonment of up to 2 years. Or $10,000 fine, or both. So for this particular felony, if this law were enacted, those would be the maximum penalties to which a physician would be subject.
So I had someone who came to see me right before the law went into effect, and I was able to see her, thank God, before the law went into effect. And she was, I don't know, she was right around 13 weeks of pregnancy and had just found out a few days prior, okay, it turns out that there's this terrible anomaly where there's pretty much no head, right? Like the brain's not there. There's not a lot there. It gets gross to describe it any more than that, but it's not okay. It's not a situation that's okay. And she came to see me and she told me, well, I couldn't go through I had this happen with my first pregnancy and I couldn't go through with the abortion. So I delivered the baby and I watched it die and I can't go through that again. And it's like literally the most horrific thing you can fucking imagine. And she was sobbing. She was like, please, I have to have an abortion now. Like she didn't want an abortion, but it was like, that is so much better than watching your baby die in your arms. Like what, now while it's at 13 weeks, when it's a small fetus, like let's take care of things, and it's so much safer then too, for her as the patient. Right. Like that's a no brainer. So now I know all those patients like her are just like, if they don't have the money to fly out of state, they're just out there. And in months from now, even if the law were to reverse at some point soon, months from now, there are going to be people who are going to go through that horrific experience. Because I used to see patients with pretty significant anomalies, maybe 1 or 2 times a week. It's rare, but they come to me if they don't want to have to go through all that.
This morning, Texas taking center stage in the debate over abortion rights, passing a law potentially impacting millions of women.
The Texas heartbeat bill is now law in the Lone Star State.
Governor Greg Abbott signing a bill Wednesday, banning abortions in most cases where a fetal heartbeat is detected, potentially as early as 6 weeks into pregnancy, before many women even know they're pregnant.
In Texas, we work to save those lives.
Similar heartbeat bans passed by other states have so far failed to hold up in court. The Texas bill is unique, permitting almost anyone to sue any person or provider who may have helped someone get an abortion after the limit.
We spoke to one woman who had such trouble finding care, she ended up for 2 weeks carrying around a dead fetus inside her. Marlene Estelle and A.D. De Silva have always wanted a little brother or sister for their daughter, Adelina. Instead, what they got was a nightmare because of a Texas anti-abortion law.
I get so angry that I was treated this way because of laws that were passed by men who have never been pregnant and never will be.
Estelle's nightmare started out as a dream come true. After months of trying, she became pregnant late last summer.
We were super excited because we didn't think I could get pregnant.
An ultrasound at 7.5 weeks showed all was well. But at an ultrasound 2 weeks later,
she said, there is no heartbeat, there is no viable pregnancy.
Estelle asked her doctor for a standard treatment, a surgery to remove the fetal remains. She says her doctor refused. That surgery, commonly known as a D&C, is the same procedure used to abort a living fetus.
She said, well, because of the new law that's passed, you're going to have to get another ultrasound for me to be able to even do anything for you.
Even after that second ultrasound, would your obstetrician give you the surgical procedure?
No.
Estelle had to go get yet another ultrasound showing her dead fetus. So you were walking around carrying a dead fetus?
And just emotionally carrying it around and just knowing that there's nothing you could do, it just feels it's like I can't grieve or move past it because I'm just walking around carrying it.
Dr. Lillian Shapiro has been an OBGYN in Atlanta for more than 30 years. When a woman is walking around with a dead fetus
for weeks because she can't get a surgical procedure. What's the danger to her?
She can develop an infection that can make her sterile and never able to have children again.
Or even worse,
When the baby dies inside, the baby starts to release parts of its tissue that can get into the mother's blood supply. It can cause organ failure. It can cause death.
Elaine Estelle pointed out the irony to me, Caitlin, that a law forcing women to have children they don't want is forcing her to consider not having children she does want.
It was a woman named Amanda. I don't know if it's her real name. 35 years old, lives in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. She had a miscarriage in her first trimester of pregnancy. She went to a hospital. They don't name the hospital. They were very kind to her. Left like a little card, a little bracelet, saying, sorry you went through this. 8 months later, she has another first trimester miscarriage. She went to the same hospital, Baylor Scott and White Medical Center, I guess, doubled over in pain, screaming as she passed a large blood clot. When she requested the exact same procedure that she had had, dilation and curettage, D&C, that's what they call the so-called partial birth abortion. The hospital told her no. She said they didn't mention the abortion law, but they sent her home with instructions to return only if she was bleeding so excessively that her blood filled a diaper more than once an hour. The hospital records that Amanda shared with the New York Times said that her embryo had no cardiac activity during that visit, and an ultrasound a week earlier. She reports having a lot of pain, and she appears distressed, the record said. This appears to be a miscarriage in process. This is according to the records that they took at the hospital. So once at home, she said she sat on the toilet digging her fingernail marks into her wall from the pain. She moved to the bathtub where she and her husband just basically watched her fill the bathtub water dark red blood. She was there for 48 hours. Same hospital. The only difference was that law that was passed. The hospital declined to discuss whether the abortion laws had any impact on their medical care.
Today, the Florida House of Representatives is expected to pass a bill tightening the state's abortion law.
This would prevent abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy. That's about 8 weeks earlier than what's currently allowed.
You know, I'm a diagnostic radiologist, and diagnostic radiologists historically and in many places in this state still do all of the first trimester OB ultrasound. So I am extraordinarily personally familiar with the development of a fetus in the womb. And for you to sit here and say that at 15 weeks, a fetus has a functional heart, a 4-chamber heart that can survive on its own is fallacious. That is not true. There is no viability. You know, I look around at my colleagues on this committee. I am the only woman on this podium right now. I am the only physician sitting on this podium. This bill is a medical sham. It does not follow medicine. It does not even purport to listen to medicine.
New anti-abortion proposal in the Missouri House would allow lawsuits against those who help residents cross state lines for the procedure, as well as making the abortion of non-viable pregnancies a crime. And I have another video I'd like to show you.
You know, you stated that women can get treatment for an ectopic pregnancy.
Absolutely.
Okay. Do you know how the treatment for ectopic pregnancies work?
No, I do not.
You don't. Okay. Do you know that one of the medications that you're trying to outlaw is one of the main drugs given to unruptured ectopic pregnancies.
Right.
The Senate has already passed the bill which will allow relatives to sue providers. It would allow the mother, father, grandparents, siblings, aunt or uncle of an unborn baby to sue the medical provider who performed an abortion for a minimum of $20,000. The bill would allow lawsuits within 4 years of an abortion being performed and would prohibit courts from awarding attorney fees to a defendant, win or lose. And you have to watch this video.
I understand that someone who has committed a rape would not be able to sue if an abortion were to take place. Would a family member of said rapist be able to sue? Would they have standing?
Down from 21.
Thank you. If it is the parents, siblings, aunts and uncles, grandparents, then yes.
Same question then for incest as well?
Down 21.
Thank you. Yes.
So if I am raped and choose to have an abortion and my rapist has 10 siblings, is there anything to preclude all of them and their spouses from bringing a lawsuit for $20,000 each?
Down from 21.
I'm not sure their spouses are included in that list, but no.
You know, you hear people talk about this law. What are the on the ground effects here? Have you seen like a major, has there been a lot less abortions because of it, that sort of thing? Like, is it doing the thing that they wanted it to do?
No, and this is actually really surprising to me and interesting. So I wasn't really expecting this. So starting September 1st, and it's really maintained through the entire time, what happened was initially the number of people I saw a day went down because I didn't have everybody who was all the way up to 18 weeks that I was seeing anymore. And also people thought maybe all of it was illegal. They didn't know if we were still open. Like, there was a lot of confusion. But then pretty quickly, I started to get as busy as I was before. And I'm sort of following all the same patterns as before and keeping up with how many I'm actually performing. And I started to pay attention, and we noticed some of our patients would disclose to us after their abortion. They would actually tell someone in the clinic, either an assistant, it happened to me one time, it happened to a nurse. They would say, I actually don't know if I really wanted an abortion, but I knew that I needed to have that option, and I would rather regret an abortion than regret having a child. And I'm like, because who wants to sit around and regret the child that you just birthed? Like, what the hell? So it's actually pushing people who has abortions.
It's pushing people into that position, and it's making them choose, and they're choosing this over something that they might not.
If you might regret it, why wouldn't you? Like, that makes sense, right? So we're in this terrible position where they find out they're pregnant, and they literally have, like, the people who can find out the very earliest, they have roughly like a week to be on it to get in and be done with their abortion.
Oh, it's 100%. That's a backfire.
Right.
Oh yeah. No, they don't even realize this is happening. It's a complete backfire. And it's so disturbing because you want, like, we're all there for the patients, and like, you got to do what you got to do. And yeah, we might've done the same in that situation because Jesus, is that where we're at? Like, that's where we're at.
Dr. Jesse Munoz, an OBGYN in San Antonio, Texas, said medical decisions used to be clear cut. It was like, if the mom's life is in danger, we must evacuate the uterus by whatever means that may be. Whether it's surgical or medical, that's the treatment. Now, he said, doctors whose patients develop pregnancy complications are struggling to determine whether a woman is, quote, sick enough to justify an abortion. Said he faced a predicament with a recent patient who started to miscarry and developed dangerous womb infection. The fetus still had sign of a heartbeat, however. So an immediate abortion, which was prior to that, the usual standard of care, would have been illegal under Texas law. We physically watched her get sicker and sicker until the fetal heartbeat stopped the next day, and then we could intervene. The patient, because they waited so long, developed complications, required surgery, lost multiple liters of blood, had to be put on a breathing machine. And he says because we were essentially 24 hours behind. This study, published in the American Journal of OBGYN, doctors at 2 Texas hospitals cited the cases of 28 women. Remember, this is in September. and God knows how many were turned away. 28 women less than 23 weeks pregnant who were treated for dangerous pregnancies. Doctor noted that all the women had recommended abortions delayed by 9 days because the fetal heart activity was detected. Of those, nearly 60% developed severe complications, nearly double the complications experienced by patients in other states who had immediate therapeutic abortions. Of 8 live births in the Texas cases, 7 died within hours. The 8th, born at 24 weeks, had severe complications, including brain bleeding, a heart defect, lung disease, intestinal and liver problems.
Oh God, I had someone today. It's like really, really fucked me up. The girl I had today, I had to tell her she was too far. Like I can't do her abortion. And she was raped a couple months ago. And she was like, I feel so gross that like I want it out. And I was like, I totally understand what you mean. Like I'm a survivor. I get what you're saying. You want it out of your body right now. And I can't do that. But here's the step. You're going to contact this fund. I literally gave her their information and they're going to hopefully be able to get her out of state. But like, that's where we are. That's how bad it is.
Fuck. Oklahoma lawmakers have passed a 6-week abortion ban modeled after the Texas law that allows civil enforcement. That's another element of this that is wacky, retrograde stuff. Kentucky has now essentially banned abortion in the state.
As we await the official Supreme Court decision on abortion rights, red states across the country are continuing to pass restrictive abortion measures with the idea that they can be challenged up to the high court or that they can just be outright allowed to stand if and when Roe v. Wade is overturned. The latest such example comes from Louisiana with a bill that they have passed. Governor John Bel Edwards, who is a Democrat, mind you, but a so-called pro-life Democrat, he has signed into law Senate Bill 342, which is a trigger law that will do away with abortion in almost all circumstances.
Good morning. We're coming on the air with breaking news from the Supreme Court. The justices handing down the highly anticipated ruling on abortion.
In this historic decision, the Supreme Court has now overturned Roe v. Wade.
The landmark decision ended constitutional protections for abortion that had been in place for nearly 50 years.
The court's 3 liberal justices dissented, writing, quote, "with sorrow for this court, but more for the many millions of American women who have today lost a fundamental constitutional protection."
This is how it will actually affect you, no matter how or where you are watching right now. 13 states have these so-called trigger laws in place for this very circumstance of Roe being overturned, meaning laws that go into effect very quickly now to ban abortion, according to the abortion rights group, the Guttmacher Institute. For example, in Kentucky, Louisiana, and South Dakota, it happens immediately, meaning if you had an appointment this morning at 8 for this procedure, you could go through with it. From here on out, no, you cannot, according to what their law has planned there. Then we move to a second group, the next level, abortion bans to be enforced 30 days after Roe is overturned. That includes Idaho, Texas, and Tennessee. And then come a half dozen states where officials would need to certify their legislation as legally valid before their bans will kick in. That includes North Dakota, Wyoming, Utah, Missouri, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Mississippi. Now, this could be incredibly quick, or it could take maybe a few days, according to Guttmacher, so they could, in effect, be immediate or a couple of days. And finally, we add in the states that have old, unenforced abortion bans, which could now be enforced, and those that passed bans under Roe, which were blocked by courts. Altogether, you get a whopping 26 states certain or likely to ban abortion, and that's compared to just 16 states and D.C. with laws to protect abortion rights, states which even now are preparing for an influx of patients crossing state lines seeking care.
like America, the United States of America, quoting 13th century law.
The bright spot is just that we're not going to obey. We're not going to obey this court or these laws.
Ain't no justice in this town.
Ain't no justice in this town.
Say, Papa, Papa, can't you see?
Papa, Papa, can't you see?
What the courts have done to me.
What the courts have done to me.
Good afternoon. I'm quite honored to have been chosen as this year's White Co-Chair for the Speaker. I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to everyone who's joining us for this special day.
Montreal, Halifax, and Toronto.
What the right must understand in Canada is that we will not stand for this here. We will defend a woman's right to choose.
Como al revés, pero lo que no pueden creer es que además lo hagamos de manera gratuita, porque en Estados Unidos el aborto y los medicamentos son muy caros. Brindando socialmente esa seguridad con todo el acompañamiento social en México y en Estados Unidos, con esta solidaridad internacional lo que estamos haciendo es eso, garantizando la seguridad de las mujeres, porque la ley no tiene la razón, la ley es restrictiva y cuando se restringe solo se pone en riesgo la vida de las personas. En este caso, nosotras estamos garantizando la salud, la vida y la libertad de las personas.
Thousands of South Australians have shut down the city protesting against the US Supreme Court's controversial abortion ban. Rosie Barnett's in the thick of it. Rosie, traffic's been brought to a standstill.
Mike, it's been absolute chaos here in the city this evening. Protesters have just arrived here at Parliament House after marching along King William Road to Victoria Square and back again, bringing traffic to a stop on a busy Friday evening. Now, their message is loud and clear. They're here defending women's rights, in particular the right to a safe abortion after the Roe v. Wade decision that sent shockwaves around the world. They say this is about solidarity with women in America who no longer have the right to choose.
President Trump, on behalf of all the MAGA patriots in America, I want to thank you for the historic victory for life in the Supreme Court yesterday.
I believe life begins at conception, and every life is valuable. And those are my personal beliefs. That is my personal belief. I believe life begins at conception.
Now you are on record as saying pro-life, no exceptions. Rape, incest, or the health of the mother, you said no exceptions. You solid there?
That's where I'm solid.
The question would be like a 14-year-old who, let's say, is a victim of abuse by an uncle.
Perfect example.
Carry that.
The Texas Medical Association sent the Texas Medical Board a letter saying, you got to do something about these bans because our hospitals are completely in disarray. Physicians are not treating ectopic pregnancies. In fact, one Central Texas physician was told to wait until the ectopic pregnancy ruptured before treating it. Ectopic pregnancies are when a pregnancy it begins outside of the uterus. So in the fallopian tubes, for example, it happens to 1 in 50 pregnancies.
And there are something like 40 to 50,000 ectopic pregnancies a year in this country. 2 other hospitals are directing doctors to send pregnant patients home to expel the fetus when their water breaks too early instead of treating them at the hospital. In those instances, there's a huge risk of infection.
As the New York Times explains, Madison Underwood was lying on the ultrasound table nearly 19 weeks pregnant when the doctor came in to say to her that her abortion had been canceled. Nurses followed and started wiping away lukewarm sonogram gel from her exposed belly as the doctor leaned over her shoulder to speak to her fiancé, Adam Queen. She recalled that she went quiet. Her body went still. What did they mean? They couldn't do the abortion. Just 2 weeks earlier, she and her fiancé had learned her fetus had a condition that would not allow it to survive outside the womb. If she tried to carry to term, she could become critically ill or even die, her doctor had said. Now she was being told she couldn't have an abortion she didn't even want but needed. Quote, "They're just going to let me die?" She remembers wondering. Tennessee allows abortion if a woman's life is in danger, but doctors feared making those decisions too soon and facing prosecution. Across the country, the legal landscape was shifting so quickly, some abortion clinics turned patients away before the laws officially took effect or while legal battles played out in state courts. Now, we're talking about a young woman here who did not want to have an abortion. She was ecstatic about the prospect of one day becoming a mother. But because of unfortunate circumstances, this was the situation that she found herself in. The fetus was not viable. Its skull did not develop, and brain fluid was leaking into the umbilic sac, which would lead to an infection that would cause sepsis, which would threaten her life. So she decided to end the pregnancy. But she couldn't, because at that time, the law was changing. The decision to overturn Roe v. Wade was announced. Now, this just goes to show you that these exceptions for the life of the mother, they're not actually adequate, because these are usually ill-defined legal gray areas, and the doctors usually just choose to play it safe, right? Or in some instances, as we've seen in Texas, for example, they just force the woman to provide them with an overwhelming amount of evidence in the event they are prosecuted. So, okay, the fetus is dead. Get an ultrasound. One more ultrasound. Okay, one more ultrasound just to be sure. This is what these exceptions for the life of the mother still put women through. They need full control over their bodies. So because she couldn't get an abortion in her state, what did she do? Well, the doctor recommended a clinic in Georgia, but there's some problems with that. For example, quote, how would her fiancé get the time off work to make the trip? How would they come up with the hotel and gas money? How long did she have until she herself became ill? A new, more terrifying question hit her. What if she felt a kick? As stress on the couple mounted, Mr. Queen quit his job to take care of Miss Underwood. His mother raised $5,250 to help with travel costs from the crowdfunding website GoFundMe. The cash would also help pay for the fetus's cremation. Now, the reason why feeling the fetus kick for the first time was so terrifying to her was because she did not want to have an abortion. She wanted a healthy baby. So that would just add trauma, knowing that, you know, this could have been something that she wanted. She could have been a mother, but it wasn't possible. So, you know.
We talked in the past, lupus patients who need a drug that is also used for medically induced abortions can't get their medication. Even in medical emergencies, writes the AP, doctors are sometimes declining immediate treatment. In the past week, an Ohio abortion clinic received calls from 2 women with ectopic pregnancies who said their doctors wouldn't treat them.
Another doctor in Wisconsin saying that a physician in her practice contacted her the week after the Supreme Court decision, and as she treated a patient with a ruptured ectopic pregnancy. Again, 1 in 50 pregnancies. She knew exactly what she had to do because the woman was bleeding and was clearly gonna die if nothing was done, Zeal said. But she wasn't sure what she needed to do to document, to be sure she wouldn't be charged with a felony. So then, to protect herself from criminal prosecution, Zeal's colleague, Ilana Winstrom, turned to an emergency room physician who treated the patient and a radiologist who reviewed the ultrasound showing the rupture, a process that took more than an hour. It turned my attention away from the bedside of the critical care patient toward documentation, Winstrom said. So in other words, Zeal is there. This is the doctor in Wisconsin. She's got to make this decision. There's a ruptured ectopic pregnancy, but am I gonna get sent to jail for doing this procedure? Instead of doing it and helping this patient, she goes and gets 2 different signatures from 2 different other doctors because of the lawyer in the hospital told her to do so. And one of those doctors, Wistrom, said, yeah, I was in a critical care moment, helping another patient. And I had to turn and sign off on this thing that 3 weeks ago was the most normal decision.
Washington Post writes a couple of stories. Woman with a life-threatening ectopic pregnancy sought emergency care at the University of Michigan after a doctor in her home state basically said, you got to get out of here because the presence of any type of fetal heart activity made it too dangerous for the doctor to treat her. One Kansas City, Missouri hospital administrators temporarily required pharmacist approval before dispensing medications used to stop postpartum hemorrhages because they can also be used for abortion. That was also like that, the lupus medicine. Methotrexate, I think it is.
It's one of those 3.
In Wisconsin, woman bled for more than 10 days from an incomplete miscarriage after emergency room staff would not remove the fetal tissue. That's in 3 weeks, those cases. 3 weeks.
3 weeks since the Supreme Court handed down the decision in that case that overturned Roe v. Wade. On that evening, on June 24th, a federal judge ruled that Ohio's 6-week abortion ban, which had been enjoined for 3 years, could go into effect now that Roe was overturned. And with the stroke of a pen, abortion effectively became illegal in the state of Ohio. If you are over 6 weeks pregnant, tough luck. You can't get an abortion in Ohio. Just 3 days after that ban went into effect, a child abuse doctor had a 10-year-old rape victim in her office. Just 10 years old. The child was 6 weeks and 3 days pregnant. She was just 3 days too late to get an abortion. In Ohio, there is no exception for rape. So if that 10-year-old got an abortion in Ohio, she would be breaking the law. That doctor took action. She called a colleague in Indiana seeking help for her patient, and that doctor said she could help. So the young girl traveled to neighboring Indiana that currently has a 22-week abortion ban and received the health care she needed. The 10-year-old story made national headlines when the doctor in Indiana who performed the abortion came forward to tell the 10-year-old story. She went on the record to share what happens when abortion is outlawed, to tell her patient's story, to show what Republicans in Ohio and on the Supreme Court had just done.
There's more of these stories. AP writes about sexual assault survivors choosing sterilization if she's ever attacked again, so she won't be forced to give birth to a rapist baby. They have a story about an obstetrician delaying inducing a miscarriage until a woman with severe pregnancy complications seems sick enough. And again, like, what is that? What constitutes sick enough?
We're going to look at a case in New Orleans where a Dr. Valerie Williams is joining a lawsuit to contest Louisiana's abortion trigger ban, which went into effect, obviously, when the Dobbs decision came down, overturning Roe v. Wade. Williams, in an affidavit, recounts a recent experience that she had with a patient that I just want to warn is incredibly upsetting, and yet somehow we have to understand this is the world that we're now in. So she writes, when the trigger bans went into effect over the weekend, I experienced firsthand and got brief insight into how these laws would harm Louisiana patients and cause unnecessary trauma and pain. I saw a patient whose water broke at 16 weeks, which is far before viability. There was no way for the pregnancy to continue without putting the patient's health at risk, and the fetus was already starting to deliver. I originally offered to perform a medical procedure called a DNE, dilation evacuation, to quickly and safely end the pregnancy. A DNA would have lasted approximately 15 minutes. After our consultation, the patient expressed that this was her preferred option since she was already traumatized from her experience and felt that an induction, which would require labor and delivery of the fetus, would be too much for her. Once I left the room, however, I heard from my hospital's lawyer that I could no longer perform the requested procedure because the trigger bans had gone into effect. Going back into the hospital room and telling the patient she would have to be induced and push out the fetus was one of the hardest conversations I ever had. She then describes a little bit of the labor She was forced to go through the painful hours-long labor to deliver a non-viable fetus despite her wishes and best medical advice. Quote, she was screaming not from the pain, but from the emotional trauma she was experiencing, the doctor wrote. The woman then hemorrhaged nearly a liter of blood, according to the affidavit, but she survived.
30% of pregnancies end in miscarriage. That's separate from the ectopic pregnancies.
Federal prosecutors say that a former Marine was plotting a series of mass murders as well as politically motivated rapes.
Not only did he plot a mass murder, he also plotted a sexual assault to decrease the number of minority residents in the United States.
So we're talking about Matthew Bellinger, a member of a neo-Nazi organization called Rape Krieg.
Much of Bellinger's ideology and plotting, the memo says, is based around a desire to lessen the number of non-white Americans and to rape white women to increase the production of white children.
But much of his ideology and plotting, according to a memo, is based around a desire to lessen the number of non-white Americans and to rape, quote, white women to increase the production of white children.
He wanted him and his comrades, so to speak, to go out and rape women. And because of these new laws after Roe v. Wade, many of these women will be forced to bring these children to full term, to birth the fetus into full term.
Walgreens clerk refused to sell condoms to married couple because of his faith, just days after a religious worker at another store said she would not refill a woman's birth control prescription. Alright, and now I came across this article, which is how I learned that it's not just Walgreens doing it, there's also a thrifty white pharmacy. Now here's an article from the 7th of August 2022. US jury finds in favor of pharmacist who denied woman morning after pill.
I'm super proud to be from Kansas tonight, and I feel like my state just showed up and boldly told me that they are going to take care of me and my female friends and everyone that can get pregnant in the state of Kansas. We are protected tonight.
Tonight, Indiana lawmakers became the first in the nation to pass new legislation restricting access to abortions since the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade.